Ranjan, thank you very much for joining me. I see that you did get the memo on the fashionable black look. I appreciate that.
We got to be matching for today. It's the only way to look.
Tell us who you are and what you do.
Yep, I'm Ranjan Roy. I'm the head of the retail industry here at Writer, working with large, mid-sized, small retailers about how they could advance their generative AI efforts.
And what was the first time you had an interaction with AI? Talk to me about that moment.
So I ran a startup from 2013 to 17 focused on news personalization. We'd been working a lot with natural language generation to try to do summaries and try to like repurpose news articles to make them more digestible. So I had had experience in the precursor to what is now large language models. When GPT-3 was launched in Playground, I started seeing on Twitter some people saying, like, holy crap, this is amazing. So I started testing, and that's when I realized like large language models were going to do what I had hoped would be happening before, that this actually was going to be something pretty powerful. I didn't realize exactly how powerful, but I knew we were onto something.
Have you always been a little bit nerdy about tech?
I think yes. Actually, my dad brought home a computer. I'll age myself here in 1983. It was the IBM 8088. And like,
Nice.
yeah, I use that computer a lot. I never was a coder. I took one software develop like a computer science class in college and actually didn't like it, but I like gadgets, tech. I love that stuff.
What was your field of study?
Economics and political science. So not exactly this, but
What brought you to that?
in high school, I did debate. So like policy debate. So I actually not tech nerd, like policy nerd, reading about like congressional legislation and things like that. And that's got me into political science, and then economics was like an easy double major in undergrad, so went with that.
So talk me through the journey from that to now. I mean, that's a pretty big leap
Oh,
from, or is it? Is it a big leap, or is it? Do you feel like there's a logical progression here?
I've thought about this a lot because I actually worked in finance first in emerging markets at Bank of America. I worked there for 7 years up until the financial crisis. I'd been wanting to leave for a while. It was a pretty comfortable life. So I stuck around probably longer than I was going to, and then went to business school. Then was at the Financial Times for a few years working in product and business development. That's when I think started to get at least a bit of the product bug. And this is 2011 to 13. So social media is starting to pick up. The way we get our information is changing. So that's when I left to do a startup informally. We were around for 4 years. And then that's when I really, I was the CEO, had a technical co founder, CTO, but still, I mean, we were at the biggest size, 11 people. So it was still very hands on with the product. And that's, I think, when really understanding and just getting into that side of the world became a lot more interesting.
And then, so what led you to retail?
So I started working on content strategy efforts and consulting across different types of firms, and then started actually consulting with Adore Me on their overall content strategy. And it was just it was unexpected, but it turned into a pretty incredible professional experience.
What lights you up about that?
So I started there in late 2018 and watched the company go from 70 million to 300 million plus in revenue, grow massively, navigate as an e-commerce company through COVID, which was wild, get acquired for over $700 million by Victoria's Secret, and got to see that firsthand, working with like some pretty amazing people. I remember our CEO described it as like a rocket ship that you're trying to build as it's flying, which kind of feels like that at Writer sometimes too. And yeah, so seeing that firsthand definitely it was pretty amazing.
So let's back up here because I want to understand kind of your vision for, you were looking at economics And it seems like maybe this is very first impression here, but that you like looking at how systems work together and grow. Yeah? The mechanisms of that system. Is that accurate?
I appreciate that because I've been told one of the things I'm good at is connecting dots that are sometimes unexpected. And I think it's having kind of a diversity of experience, but also like throughout it all, it was kind of taking large amounts of information and trying to make sense of it, whether that's in finance with like four screens up and like looking at seven different emerging markets, or within news and trying to rethink how do consumers actually like consume news and how's it delivered and created to a startup. So like throughout it all, it's like how do you take lots of information and try to do something with it, which is why I think, again, generative AI, the moment I started interacting with it, I jumped on board as fast as possible.
Great segue, because I was going to say, let's
Yeah.
narrow our focus and see, okay, so how does AI fit into this? And I would love you to walk me through the story of, I saw your presentation at AILF last year. I think it's really cool story of just the practical applications as a very early adopter of AI to a retail brand. So talk me through a little bit of that journey.
Yeah. So I had been playing around with some different like GPT-3 and some other tools very early. This is a year before ChatGPT is publicly released. We were a writer customer using it as a copy guide, like a very customizable copy guide and tool, but not a generative AI tool at the time. And then found out that Writer would be starting to launch and alpha test generative AI capabilities, got connected with the team, started working very closely together, like sending CSVs back and forth for Writer to fine tune a model, and then manually copying and pasting or kind of like pouring through hundreds of outputs to see is it good, is it not good. But then we were able to automate all of our product description creation before ChatGPT even launched in the summer of 2022. It was interesting because it was at a time when no one cared about this, which was kind of fun. There was no hype. It was just simply, here's an interesting technology. Can we do something useful with it and actually make it work? And sometimes, you're wistful for those innocent days of generative AI. But it was all that mattered was, could I solve this simple problem?
What was the reception on the team, with your leadership team for bringing this new technology in?
The moment ChatGPT was released, then there was a lot more interest. At first, there's resistance. There's certainly resistance. And I mean, throughout the need around change management and what it looks like and how do you get people involved, and we can dig more into that. But the moment everyone started hearing that something is happening and then being able to show, hey, we actually are already doing this and we can do a lot more. So it was definitely overall a great deal of excitement. I think also because we started with a win, it made it a lot easier for people to want to be on board and try to solve problems or try to apply it to their own areas because they saw product descriptions. And we started with something that in her semi-annual reviews, this was the worst part of the job, writing 120 product descriptions, taking 40 hours each month, trying to be creative over and over and over. It's not a fun thing. I mean, it's just not. So starting with the problem with work that people did not want to do made it even better because then suddenly it's like, oh, wait, that kind of work we can start using technology to solve. So then I can actually work on fun, more creative stuff.
And then it goes, the product descriptions, it's very structured. You have to find variants across the different e-commerce channels and things like that. But then you also found ways of incorporating personalization, which is a huge win for anyone in retail. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about that and how you discovered ways of solving for that.
The way we built things at Adore Me using Writer, It really was very quickly understanding that product descriptions, you have some information in. I mean, we're talking about systems basically. You have information in. There's one thing, a prompt in this case, that does something to it, and then you push it out to somewhere else and publish it. So then once you start automating that and seeing that it can work, then thinking, okay, what if we now have three different personas that are just three different prompts, and then those push in different ways to different channels or even just a product page, and then starting to build these as blocks on top of each other. Okay, what if we have 10 different personas? What if we incorporate a customer's purchase history to also influence what's being talked about? What if we take product reviews and use things that people said within them and then use that information to create that content? And then what if we put it in an email as a push notification on a website? But this is where the agentic AI and agentic workflows has been the true light bulb moment for me, because in reality, that's what we were doing the whole time. There's always these different, it was just code and scripts tying stuff together, and then Writer's AI Studio making that easier. But in reality, there's always these different flows. And once you get that, building new ways to actually use that to make really, really personalized content became actually not easy, but a lot more straightforward and logical.
I mean, when you came to Adore Me, like, yes, innovation was part of your job, but did you expect that this type of innovation, this level of innovation, this deep dive into AI itself would be part of your job?
No, no, not at all. Because in reality, Adore Me was a very, very strong technical organization. We had an amazing engineering team. That was one of like the core strengths of Adore Me. So I did not think that that would be where I would be spending most of my time. But I think what was different for me was writing, communication, words. Our team at Adore Me, I'd actually named Words. Adore Me Words was the copywriting team. Those are the things that I've always been interested in, pretty good at. And to me, that's why large language models and generative AI is actually even more interesting and applicable to me, because using words to get a desired output is basically what you're doing. And I think that's what makes it different than other types of certainly coding, but also just technology as well. It's more kind of like humanities than computer science or the science side of it, to me at least.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've been talking with all of these folks that have humanities backgrounds, and they, all of a sudden this STEM aspect of their identity is coming out in a way that it probably wouldn't have surfaced before, because it's using natural language to get these type of outputs, and you're building using natural language. It's very cool to see all of these people who were like creators and are still creators, but now they're also builders. And I think that's just a really cool transformation of these roles in business.
That's exactly it. That it allows you to, again, build things that never would have been possible in any other context. You would not have had either been able to develop that skill, had the time to develop that skill. And now you can just hack things together, build things, have fun, do creative things in different ways using language. That's exactly it.
What inspired you to be like, okay, this role as a strategy lead at Adore Me is great, but man, I am all in on this AI thing. Let me go talk to Writer about being a retail lead.
So, I mean, we had been using Writer. What I'd seen over the last few years was that the projects that we undertook or the efforts using Writer, they worked. And I wondered a lot about that, whereas there was a lot of efforts that did not. And to me, the biggest differentiation was Writer, the entire way it was built was to incorporate people on the business side, the actual end user into the process. And we saw that firsthand. And to me, both the change management side, but also the actual efficacy side of any of these things, these projects or tests, if you don't have that end user involved, I don't think it's going to work, or it's not going to work well. And we saw in product descriptions, actually having a copywriter own the prompt layer changes the entire thing, because then they start to understand the value that they can create. they start to see how it all works, like how generative AI, how large language models, when you start putting in a prompt, tweaking it, seeing the output, you start to get it. You start to see the value, maybe more quickly applying it to other areas of your job. And to me, when it's code being written, a script being written in LLM, maybe they write a prompt once and then it goes into a script never to be seen again, living in the ether of a code base somewhere, versus it's like a living, breathing thing. To me, that was the single biggest difference about why it worked well.
So you made this change to writer as our industry lead. And I'm wondering, when you were inside working in house at a company doing this AI innovation, were you in your own little bubble? Were you talking to other folks at retail brands on how they're working with AI? And are you getting a different perspective now that you're talking with folks representing an AI company?
That's a good question. I mean, I was fairly public over time about our work and at conferences, and like, so I spoke with a lot of people. So I had like a pretty good impression, at least from the outside, of what the average AI maturity or practice looks like at different companies. But I mean, certainly now I think have a much, much more deep understanding of exactly the really core challenges being faced, the goals of different people. But actually, what I realized is it's not that different than what I had known before or seen. I mean, the challenges are pretty consistent and can be overcome, but like it really is fairly uniform across the board. There's nuances company by company, but again, change management, understanding how to work with generative AI, that it is a different type of tool, understanding your own business processes and trying to think about where exactly to apply them, getting it done and actually moving it through. I think those are all pretty common.
Do you consider those challenges, or do you think those are best practices, right?
Yeah, yeah, to get them done, to get it done is the best practice. Yeah.
So talk me through some of the challenges that are pretty common and how people are talking about it, and maybe the band-aid methods they're using to overcome it versus like, okay, no, this requires surgery. It's not we can't put a band-aid on it.
To me, one of the biggest challenges I think that's in the industry right now is expectations management. And I think there's, to a fault, I think the overall industry, especially like certain companies, like really push this idea that it's easy. Again, you will just put in a prompt the first time and suddenly everything will work and you'll solve all your business problems and change all your processes.
Why do you think they think that? Like, what is that? Where is that expectation coming from?
I think the industry as a whole has kind of propagated that. The industry as a whole has pushed this idea that it's easy, that these flashy demos and big announcements of products that never quite show up, or like it'll all just work the first time perfectly, is something that has been kind of injected. I even saw it. I remember there, like, we had built this customer insights knowledge graph chat where basically uploaded at Adore Me using Writer, like uploaded 360,000 customer reviews, hundreds of hours of video transcripts. You could just ask it questions. And it was amazing. And it actually, that was the first product where people outside of marketing started using on the inventory side, on the even the fashion design side, because suddenly you had access to all of this. And I remember, like, our CMO, I want to turn some of this into a new type of content and just have it published in different ways. And it not looking perfect the first time and being like, we'll get there, don't worry. But let's, even on like image generation, I feel in visual generative AI is even more so, where there was the time where six fingers showing up was not good. But even now, like absolute product fidelity and an perfect print design and stuff, like the technology, knowing how to use it, where it can work right away and how you get it to work, is something that I'm really trying to get our customers and the people we're talking to understand, so it helps them sift through the kind of pie in the sky promises or ideas that might be in their head to start.
That during that initial evaluation and or adoption phase, that you do have to have that phase of fidelity, like this isn't going to be perfect, but how quickly can this technology iterate to a point where it does reach fidelity? Is that part of that framework, you think?
Yes, I think the more the customer can be educated, and that evaluation process, the onboarding process, the education is just as important as the actual output. I always like to think that if you don't get the output you want, and I would say this at Adore Me, like that's your fault. It can get there. You need to keep iterating on the prompt, on the system, what data is flowing into where. It can get there, especially, I mean, most of the problems, we're not like decoding the human genome in retail marketing. Like it's most of the AI that's required, the model power that's required is there. It's you need to work to get to the output you want rather than it's the fault of the system or the model. And we saw it over and over that with a little bit of work, when you understand how these systems work, you can get there. And again, it's like a muscle, and the more people start kind of exercising it, the more quickly they're able to solve problem. If problem one takes a bit of time, problem 5, 10, 15, 20, it just gets faster and faster. That idea of speed to value and that increasing is something that came up a few times, and I really like that idea that like it takes time and then it gets faster and more effective.
So that's kind of handling those expectations. That's one of the challenges. What are some of the other challenges that you're either facing to help people embrace AI or that they're facing as they either work through AI strategy or just in general as retailers that are universal challenges?
Yeah, I think what problem to tackle and in what order is actually one of the most important things with any kind of AI strategy and strategy in general, I think. But like we like to use crawl, walk, run at Writer. And I heard it when I started here. I'd never like used it that much outside. And I really like it because it's the idea that starting with like very tangible problems, seeing wins on those problems, learning from them as you actually build those solutions, and then walking and moving faster and still working together with Writer. And at Adore Me, we were able to do this. We've seen other customers do this, running and solving your own problems much more quickly using the overall Writer platform. That's how people need to think about it rather than let's rewire the entire organization on day one and solve everything and like solve the most complex problems. I think forcing yourself to think like that is how you will actually succeed with any of this.
In your experience, that product description use case was a good crawl moment.
Exactly. Like first product descriptions. Then we were selling more on Amazon, Walmart, Target, Macy's on multi channel. Each one of those was basically, again, thinking this like these workflows and blocks. It was just another block. Like Amazon has slightly different requirements. Macy's has different requirements. Target. That was so much faster and better and easier to do than the first product description iteration. Even translation, we were able to do relatively quickly because, again, once you kind of get that core infrastructure built on relatively straightforward problems or your easier ones, you can start to tackle the more complex problems.
Because I'm on a content team, uh, and because I manage in-house as well as freelancers, getting them unified on how to approach using these tools is, I imagine, a challenge for anyone, regardless of the industry. You talked before there was some resistance at first. Can you talk me through some of your, ways of getting folks hooked and saying, oh, yeah, this makes my life easier?
Yeah, I think it really is showing them how they can do better with generative AI. If that's getting into the prompt and actually being part of whatever process you're trying to rethink, that is the single most important thing you can do. And another thing I think with Writer that we do very well is not just the model, it's not just the prompt, but it's even the front end of how you experience it or interact with it makes a big difference. So we have Writer Framework, which is a very flexible, like drag and drop essentially front end framework. Even on a as a writer or like a content person, if you just go to a chat screen with a blank cursor and you just don't know where to start, what do you do? Like, and you try some stuff out versus here is a form, here is like very specific things to put in. And then we can shape that any way we want. Even at Adore Me, when we were still not doing it fully automated and having someone still verify every single one, the copywriter was like, I want 3 outputs just to kind of take a look and I'll choose whichever one I like. We could build it exactly like that. So those kind of things and being able to kind of like guide how people interact with these systems, I think then it makes it easier for them to do things the way they want to.
As an industry, what are the attitudes that you're seeing about AI for retailers? Where are the big innovative opportunities that are, yeah, product descriptions are great, but where's the walk and where's the run happening?
Yeah, I think in retail, because it's a heavily creative visual industry, and even I'm putting like more traditional toilet paper on Amazon, I'm putting it in there along with high fashion that's being sold online. Everyone's head goes towards the more distant, difficult things around like, should we generate models that look like humans with our products? Should we think about video? And again, like product descriptions, it's a pretty basic part of the overall system, but it's an important one. Web copy, email subject lines. Like I actually think starting with those more fundamental building blocks is where people's heads need to be. And then if you can do that well, you'll be leading as the technology progresses on the more creative stuff. Because even we've seen like image generation, and we've been speaking with customers around this, like background removal, adding drop shadows, these kind of things that are actually pretty core to e-commerce are very good right now. Getting a background, like put this product on a beach setting or even on a table and get everything right, is getting there. I wouldn't say it's not like easy yet, but and it'll probably get there. But start with the background removals. Start with the things that are possible. But even before that, start with the product description or start with the really, really straightforward problems where your data is accessible and you can actually start to work and get results very quickly. I still think like that's the toughest part, especially in retail, is that as an industry, it's a very creative one. So it still thinks about the more far off advanced type use cases rather than what's right in front of them and can actually start bringing value tomorrow.
I guess I'm going to bucket these as grunt work use cases. Give me like a tangible example, a really good story about when you get that grunt work out of the way and you're giving people that space. These are copywriters, these are brand people. What kinds of ideas are they coming up with? What are they freed up to do?
In that exact case, our copywriter can then work more on, I was writing like podcast ad scripts, which you could technically use generative AI for as a first draft, but still to get something on air could be super creative, coming up with original ideas. And I think it's in almost any function, there's some higher value work that's being done. Again, like performance marketing advertising, the copywriting is a smaller part of it. Coming up with the ideas, doing the actual creative outputs is much more high value. And that's where, energy can be placed. But I really believe like you take any function in any industry, there's a hierarchy of work that's done, and allowing people to do the more interesting, impactful work is not only just important. Adore Me was founded in 2011 as like online retail was taking off. And then we would always say that like we would have to reinvent ourselves every 3-4 years because retail changes so much and it's still changing. I mean, the way malls were supposed to be dead, now they're kind of back. Like everyone was going to go online, shipping was going to be free, but now we're not quite sure. Even the entire supply chain infrastructure is quite volatile right now, to say the least. How people shop, what they want to shop for, is only going to change more and more rapidly. There's like some fundamentals in retail, which I still believe sell a good product at a good price, but everything else around it is going to start changing even more rapidly. So allowing people to think about how to handle that change, how to deal with it, how to embrace it, thinking about that stuff rather than the grunt work is not just like a nice to have eventually, or even now, it's much more of a need to have.
You've been doing this a lot longer than most retail folks in terms of working with AI. How do you feel like it's changed you as a professional, as a leader, as a person?
It certainly made me more efficient, even in my day to day life. So I'm very happy about that. But I think it's made me more curious. And I've worked in different industries. I've always been fascinated by lots of different things. But now actually being able to go down a rabbit hole that's not a social media scrolling rabbit hole, but rather like an intellectual rabbit hole using generative AI and learning about things that you never would have imagined and researching things. I think it allows you to like be more curious. And actually, I think that's one of my favorite things about it.
Is there a moment where you said, "Oh, this is a new path for me," or this is a new chapter for me?
I knew when I started interacting with large language models, I knew that's where I was going. I knew it. I did not think it would be as big of a story as it is today. It was kind of an extension, I felt, of like what I had always been interested in, what how I thought in general. So I knew this is what I want to work with, knowing that it would potentially be this massive industry that's going to reshape the entire world and business as we know it. I didn't quite realize that, but definitely I knew this is what I wanted to work with.
Because your curiosity has been opened up or expanded, I'm assuming that your imagination has also been engaged a lot. So, as you think about the next 5, 10 years, where do you see this going? What's this transformative world that we're going to be entering into?
The world as a whole can be another hour of a conversation. In the context of retail, to me, what I'm most excited about is hyper personalization, just seeing things that you want, getting the information that is most relevant to you to make that decision, even how you experience shopping and having fun around it. I think all of that is going to get much better and much more exciting. And like, there's a lot of talk about conversational shopping and like, are we all going to be shopping with a chatbot? I do believe that a lot of commoditized products will be shopped through some kind of very simple chat experience. And whether that's talking to your phone, whether that's typing into a chatbot, because those kind of products, I mean, you just want to buy them and you don't care that much. And if you trust someone to recommend something to you, but I don't think websites go away. I think like the same reason when you go to a mall, for the most part, you don't know what you want. The experience is in the walking and the browsing and being there, and that is the opposite of the idea of chat-based shopping, that I'm going to like filter out all the information to get me exactly what I want. There's still, especially in retail, a strong value to overall just the experience of discovery and shopping, and I don't think that goes away in any way, because that's like a human trait, an innate human trait. So
We are hunters and gatherers, right?
that's yeah, exactly. What does get me even more excited though is like at Adore Me, we use this thing called Visual, which was like a virtual try-on service. Like I think there's going to be like a lot of innovation around what it means to experience that discovery and just browsing shopping side of it. It's not going to just be any longer scrolling a website. I think there'll be some kind of destinations and they'll present us products in different ways versus just a couple of images. But I think there's still going to be a lot around creating even better experiences for that discovery, the discovery bug that lives in us all.
That is an insight that I actually was not expecting to have with you
Yeah.
today, is about the magic of discovery when you're shopping. I am an in and out. I want to find it, I want to grab it, I want to go, because I get overwhelmed by the sensory
Okay.
experience of shopping. However, I have had great shopping experiences like that where it's like, oh man, I found a great deal on exactly what I was looking for. And that's a discovery moment. And that's a dopamine rush, right? I think that's so cool. There is a psychological need that is being fulfilled that isn't just about consumption.
Yeah, no, I think It's not, and it's just in the purchase process, it's in the post purchase process. I think there can be a lot of really interesting things done. And I'll say myself, I'm not a huge mall person, but when I shop, I go to Reddit a lot, different blogs. I like still scroll websites and watch YouTube videos. And it's that whole journey. And then even after I buy something, then finding a community, if I'm like really interested in that product and brand, and suddenly starting to interact with them. Like it's a long journey. The brands who do it well with good products, especially the ones who have built these other ways to experience it, I mean, it fulfills a psychological need.
Yeah,
I guess I'll admit
absolutely.
it here. I like to shop.
Yeah, I just went to the outlet mall. I live very close to one, and I was looking for some clothes I could wear to work, and I was getting hopeless because I had just gone to like the Mall of America. I'm in Minnesota, so largest one of the largest malls in the country.
Hence the sensory overload.
Exactly. Could not find a thing. Went to the outlet mall, walked into a Calvin Klein store. Like, this is the outlet store, but I was treated like a queen by the staff. Looked at these good quality pieces of clothing and had that satisfaction of not only can I afford this, I'm getting a really good deal on it. And it was a psychological need being fulfilled. And I'm curious if you have a vision for how AI would enhance that experience or replace some things.
Well, no, no. We've been talking with a number of customers around this. Again, how do you use AI to actually enhance the human interaction and connection between the retail associate and the customer? Even connecting online shopping history to offline, and then trying to pull out some kind of insights around what to present to the customer, even inventory data in store or allowing them to purchase online. There's a lot of both really straightforward kind of like systems things that can be done. But then how do you enhance that conversation or experience between the two people in that situation? I think using flow of information and flow of personalized information, I think there's a huge opportunity for customers who figure this out.
I want to ask you something that I ask all of our guests, which is looking back at the beginning of this journey, either when you first interacted with AI or before, if you could have a conversation with yourself, what would you tell that guy?
That's a good question. I think possibly it would be join writer even earlier, maybe.
We're not trying to be promotional here.
I know, no, but I mean, watching from the outside was quite something. So, but I'm very glad to be here now. I would have told myself to start building even more when I started interacting with generative AI, because it was not at the level of hype that it is now. It was still kind of like a side thing that I was trying to do. It was literally like number 12 of 15 projects that I wanted to tackle. And like really diving in even more. And I dove in, I would say, far more than most people, realizing that it's even more this such a unique opportunity rather than this cool new thing that has launched and you might be pretty good at. So I would have given myself a bit more of a push, but I'm still happy with the journey in general.
You're definitely in a great place here, Ranjan.
Yeah.
Congrats. Welcome to the
Not being
team.
promotional, not being
No,
promotional,
not
but
promotional, but yeah,
yeah.
I'm happy for you. I'm happy to have you with us. And I'm happy to have this conversation. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much.